There.
The Hangout on Air is live. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
I hope you all brought your coffee with you.
Oh, I'm two-fisting it today. Where's my camera? There we go.
It's one of those kind of mornings. I started with the
Actually,
wrong
it's three, but I already finished the first one. I didn't want to.
I started with the wrong profile. Then I couldn't get my mic to work. Then I was having trouble.
We have
inviting
Mondays
people.
on Fridays. I think we have Mondays on Fridays, don't we?
What?
I think we have Mondays on Fridays when it comes to all these stupid little.
Well, you would
My
think after
Monday
3
just has
years they'd
not
get
ended.
this thing fixed.
I don't know. So, Dennis, you brought this up, so I figure we'll start here. What we did with the chats, we've been, and for those who may not know, we've had the chats going on for a while now. Every Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. we've had a different person on the chat, and you've noticed recently that I've been, thanking the people at the beginning of the Hangout who have been hosting that for us. So I should do that now. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to share my screen with you real quick, and then I'll kind of explain what's going on here. All right. No more technical difficulties. Am I still fuzzy?
Fine.
Well, now it shouldn't be. So
You look a little
we
colorless.
have our. Yeah, see, now I'm not fuzzy anymore. So we have Katie on Monday, talks about QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks. We've got Mariette on Tuesdays talking taxes. Jay Kilman on Wednesdays talking Zero. Billy Ann, who's here with us this morning, a very special appearance, who talks about QBO and QuickBooks. And then we have Joanne, who's going to be later today at 12, all things accounting. Now, what we've been doing is the chat has been private for scholars only at schoolofbookkeeping.com. But there was some talk about making it available to the public. Mariette was sort of pushing hard for that. So we talked about it and ultimately decided, you know what, the group in ABO, accountants, bookkeepers, and business owners, has been so active and so great on Facebook that we said, why not just kind of move it there and host it there? So that what we're doing is each of these same lovely people are going to host it, but they're going to host it in the ABO group, meaning they'll start a thread, on Monday. Later today, Joanne, let's start there since it's Friday. Later today, Joanne is going to go into ABO at about 12 noon Pacific, 3 on Eastern time, and she's going to say, okay, we're starting the All Things Accounting chat on ABO. So
I like that.
yeah, this way it's available to the public, and it's happening right there in ABO. And, another thing, and Katie posted about this, I want to actually show you this, because I guess not a lot of people know this. It was one of those things that I thought everybody knew, but maybe they don't. So instead of making the assumption, I want to show you something about how the ABO group works that's really cool. And, the truth is, oh, look, there's Joanne. With her Good Morning ABO.
Nah, she's at camp.
That's funny. So it's almost like she's with us here. But, I don't mind that people ask the same questions that have been asked, because every time you get different people answering and different answers, right? And different spins on the answers. But in case you want to see, for example, all the threads, or certainly all the recent threads, where somebody has talked about practice development, and that may not be a good one. Let's do one that's going to be more likely to come up a lot. Let's say people are asking about Bill.com, right? You go right here in this search box and search Bill.com. And it's going to come up with every thread pretty much where Bill.com has been mentioned. Now you can also search for an individual's name. So you see there's Mariette with her Bill.com. There's her posting about the course we just released on Bill.com. Right, so that's available now at School of Bookkeeping, and it's available to the public. So you should definitely go on to schoolofbookkeeping.com and check that out if you're wondering about Bill.com. Right, there's Eric posting. So the search in the groups on Facebook is really good. Search for Gina. Let's see what Gina's been saying in Abo. Look at that. So there's Gina posting. Gina, does this mean you're having 17 hats on your Hangout?
Yes.
When is that? Is that today?
She's muted.
You're
yes,
muted.
it's today.
Sorry
5:30
about
Eastern.
that. Yes, thank you, Sarah. I'm on a different machine, we'll say. I'm not used to this.
So Seth,
No worries. So you're doing 17 hats today, Gina?
Yes, looking forward to it. We'll be talking to Donovan Janis. Lots of people are scheduled to show up. So if you want an invite, let me know. I'll make sure that you get in before we invite it to the whole public.
Yay.
Perfect.
hey
So
Seth,
just reach out to Gina, folks. Dennis?
it looked to me like the main difference was before it was like interactive, like sort of a hangout without a video. Now is it going to be sort of time delayed in terms of you ask a question, then maybe you'll get a response in 10 minutes or something like that, or is it interactive?
No, there's going to be somebody. That's the point. Is the same person who would have been handling the live chat is going to be handling this live. So, you know, with Facebook, the way you want to do it, and here's another little tip. So let's say this thread that Gina started talking about 17 hats was going to be the same post that we wanted to have a chat about. All you do is click on this timestamp, and that way it takes you into a page in your browser where you're only looking at that thread. So the minute you respond right away, and the response will, you know, so you'll see it instantly.
But it
That's
will
all.
be,
So it's like having the chat right here in a Facebook thread in the group.
but will there be like multiple people on the chat, or is it kind of like?
Well, anybody in the group who's around who wants to participate, yeah.
Okay. I just saw it on Wednesday, and I thought, well, I've got other things I got to do, so I didn't. It just looked different, so I thought, well, I'll just come back and I'll ask you on Friday what the change was. So.
Yeah. So in fact, let's see. Billy Ann, are you able to unmute?
Yeah, I'm here. You may hear a kiddo
Why
in
don't
the
you talk
background.
about how yours went yesterday while I look for it? I'm going to use the search to find yours.
Well, what I did is I started a thread, and then I had a couple of people ask me questions, so then I broke out in 2 separate topics. And it worked really, really well. I mean, as long as I got tagged, I knew to go look for things, and then, of course, Facebook notifications kept me on top of things. But it was a really great experience because I had people interacting who normally, you know, wouldn't be on the old SOB chat.
Right. So here's Billy Ann's. I had a blast chatting with everyone, but this wasn't the thread, was it?
No, the first thread was, I don't remember, it was like at 6 o'clock.
Oh, there's topic number 2, and we have our first topic. So you could even continue. So let's say, Dennis, you didn't have time then. You could go in there today now, and that's kind of the beauty of this, is it's permanently here. And you could go read through the thread. And again, you click, see where it says yesterday at 7:13 a.m. You could click on this, and then you're looking at a page that only contains that thread.
Okay,
Maybe
as
with
opposed to being like
instructions for this.
So as opposed to being like a mishmash of topics like the old chat was, where people were kind of going every which way, it would be organized into different threads.
Well, you could, or maybe not. I mean, you know, it just depends. The topics are at a high level based on, you know, how we outline it here on the website, right? So
Okay.
Billy Ann is kind of, you know, held out as being somebody who's going to talk about QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks. But obviously, if Billy Ann wants to talk about practice development, you know, anything goes.
Okay.
You know, and it could all be in the same thread, or, you know, I guess Billy Ann decided to break it out into 2 separate ones. And, you know, the other thing is you can certainly duplicate the tab, right, so that you can have 2 threads going at one time. You know, and this is where Sprout Social or whatever, or Hootsuite or whatever app you're using to manage social media can be helpful, as long as the app you're using allows you to kind of participate in groups within the app. Some do, some don't.
Okay. I'll have to give it a try.
Yeah, I broke out the topics just to try to keep it a little bit more organized and less cumbersome. I don't know that I'll do that all the time. I'm just still kind of playing with it, as I think we all are, as to see what's going to work best.
Oh, okay.
I think we need
but I like this
instructions
because
for
it's
this.
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Well,
I know, but I wouldn't have known to click on the timestamp.
Oh, I've got a video on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. My stupid.
Oh, I always click on comment.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
guess
you
it
click
does
on
the
comment
same
to leave a
thing.
comment, but the timestamp gets you. It's the permalink directly to that thread.
Oh, I
So,
don't leave a comment
you know how
necessarily, but it's a link. Oh.
I missed that.
I said when I click on comment, it's really just to hop over to the comments, not necessarily to leave a comment.
Well, it takes you over to, the idea is it's what you're normally meant to click on when you're ready to leave a comment, because it takes you to go, see how I clicked on it, it took me right to write a comment. So, I mean, because normally if I just want to read the comments, I'll just start right here below the post.
And read
and
up.
Sometimes what it'll do, if there's a lot of comments, is up here right above the first one you're seeing, it'll say show previous, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can click that to show previous. But, I mean, at least the way I always think of it, if I'm clicking on comments, because, and notice when I hover my mouse over it, even gives me the instruction, leave a comment. So, it's, but the permalink, clicking on the date and the timestamp, and that works everywhere. That works on Twitter, that works on Google+. That's how you can, bookmark an entire thread. So I've done that. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but there have been times where I've resurrected a really old thread, because the other thing groups do on Facebook is if I comment on something, it moves it to the top. Right? It moves it right to the top, so that becomes the last thread that's gotten a comment. It becomes the first post you see when you go into the group. Mm-hmm. And what I've done in many cases is if I know, let's say, that I'm going to do a video or a blog post about something that was discussed here, I will often bookmark the thread, because I know that once the blog post is done, I'm going to want to come back to it, and post a comment and say, hey, here's a blog post that I, read or wrote in a video that I recorded that addresses this. And so that's how you can bookmark a thread, is by clicking on that timestamp and then taking this bookmark up here. And of course, in my case, I copy and paste it into a note, Evernote, with some notes reminding me, this was Billy Ann's, chat that she held on July 9th. Record a video and post it here when it's ready. So that can come in handy a lot, especially if you know that there's a thread going on that you want to come back to for any reason, whether it's because there's information there that you want to refer back to for your own research or whatever it is. It's definitely, I find it very handy, to know how to sort of bookmark that permalink. And this is why today I called the Hangout Who's on Third, because I honestly didn't know what the hell we'd be talking about. But so I think I don't know. I think this is a great alternative to what we've been doing, especially because now anybody can get access to it. You don't have to be registered with schoolofbookkeeping.com. As much as I would love you to register with schoolofbookkeeping.com. Mm-hmm. So what happened to Suchi? We lose her? I guess we did. Oh no, there you are. You moved. You were in the middle of my panel before. You moved to the right somehow.
That's because I'm always right.
I like that.
Well, the Facebook page has really become a great help desk.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this, 3,692 members.
Wow. And the quality of the responses and CPAs and people with all kinds of experience, it's just a wealth of knowledge. So.
Yep. Although, since we're on the topic, I will say this. I had a CPA who's in the group here who I'm very friendly with. He's local here in Los Angeles, who reached out to me, and he was kind of giving me like a friendly warning that I guess he's noticed, and he didn't give me any specific examples, so I have no idea what he was referring to. But he said that he's noticed cases where people were giving, really incorrect or inaccurate tax advice. So, yeah, and I guess my comment on that is, first, please don't give tax advice if you're not qualified to. Like I don't. When people get into tax questions, I say, look, that's not my area of expertise. You want to know financial accounting? I'm all over it. Yeah. But taxes, that's what enrolled agents and CPAs are for. So I guess my comment, based on his comment, is, just be careful. Make sure that the advice you're giving, and always, always, always qualify, any advice you're giving anyway, even if you are an expert in that area.
Mm-hmm.
I always like to try and remember to tell people, hey, check with your local CPA or whomever you trust with this kind of advice.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Sometimes it's a consensus too. I mean, if there's a hot topic, that people are disagreeing, because sometimes some people go left, some people go right, but we end up at the same place, whether it, regardless of what the topic is. And so you can't just believe everything you hear on the internet or read on the internet, of course. But if something gets really hot and you have 300 comments, chances are the truth's in there somewhere.
Yeah, I belong to a CPA roundtable and we meet like once a month for lunch, and we talk about different things, and some people have like 30, 40 years of experience, and there's still a lot of disagreement on certain things, and there's really no one clear answer. It's kind of like, it sort of depends on facts and circumstances. So.
Well, that's true, Dennis, and sometimes you could ask 3 different IRS agents a tax question and they give you 3 different answers.
Or maybe 5 different answers. Yeah, I would never trust the IRS, giving me tax.
No, there's always going to be those things where the answer is a little subjective.
It depends.
I guess what he was saying is there were people that were telling people flat out like the wrong thing.
Well, I'd be very reluctant to say categorically that this is, because it's so much based on facts and circumstances that.
Yeah. Yep. So, of course, what I did was I turned around and asked him, if and when he notices that, to please chime in. That's the whole purpose of the group, that hopefully if he sees something like that, he would come in there and say, hey, guys, and obviously the best way on something like that is cite the tax code. For talking taxes, grab the code and put it in there and say, here's the accurate answer to this question. Please be careful when you're answering tax questions, because if you give somebody the wrong advice and they suffer a financial loss as a result, that could lead to problems.
Yeah. Yes.
So, but there's lots of little features in here that I think people don't notice because they're so busy, like in the threads. So Katie had mentioned in a post the other day about using this search. I use this search a lot. It's really good. It works really well if you're looking for everything, or like I said earlier, all the recent threads that might have dealt with a particular topic or especially a product. This will be funny. Let's pull up 17 hats, because you may have noticed at one point that Mariette was posting about 17 hats just about every 5 minutes. So let's see what happens.
So the search in the Facebook in the upper left-hand corner, that's strictly confined to the ABLE group, right?
Yes.
The topics. Okay.
Well, every group on Facebook has a search like that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not that familiar with Facebook. I'm sort of getting.
So here's a first, Gina. Then so here's Pamela, and I'm assuming there's something in the comments. See, now this guy, Sarah, is what you click on when you want to view the comments. The little comment box that has the 8 next to it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
That's what you click on to reveal, and then this is what I was talking about before, where it says view 5 more comments.
So what is the difference between that and clicking on July 3rd?
Well, that's to see the comments. Clicking on July 3rd is going to take you to the permalink for the thread. It's completely different. Clicking on this just shows you the comments, so you can scroll through them and read them. Now, if you wanted to link directly to a comment, notice each comment has its own timestamp. So I can actually, if I want to refer back to Tiffany's comment specifically, I can click this, July 3rd at 1:25 p.m., and Facebook will load the thread, and then it will scroll me right down to that comment.
Huh.
Hey, Seth, have you thought about doing a updated video for all the changes in the ABLE Facebook? All the different features?
Well, these aren't changes. I mean, none of this is new, but that's why I'm doing this now, is I realized that, based on Katie's comment, that not everybody, this may not be as obvious to everybody as I guess I would have thought it was,
Well, a lot of people are casual Facebook users, kind of like myself, where I just sort of get in. I don't really have any in-depth knowledge of it. I just sort of, putz around in it. And
Right. So now I'm trying to figure out, why did this come up when we searched 17 hats? Did she mention it in the actual post, or was it theoretically it would have been in a comment or something?
So this is my problem too. I am search retarded.
Search challenged.
Here,
Thank
it's
you.
in this last comment, and I had to click see more.
Politically correct, Gina. Might offend someone.
Yeah, but at the time when I'm going through it, I am search retarded.
But what do you mean by that? You mean you don't know how to like type the right thing or what to search for, or?
It doesn't search for what I want it to. I don't know if I'm telling it the wrong thing, or
Can you do things like quotes and like, you know, little tricks like that to make it zero in on exactly what you want? Or?
Pluses and
Yeah,
minuses.
generally speaking, the longer the sort of search term, the more precise it's going to be. I mean, that's ideal. Like if I search 17 hats and I'm getting, and notice what it does. It highlights where it finds 17 hats so that I know this is why it's showing up here.
That's
So can
cool.
you put like pluses and minuses like you do in Google search?
What do you
see,
mean?
my
Well,
problem
like if
is
you want to combine, like say 17 hats plus maybe CRM features, that kind of thing.
I don't know. I've never tried that here. I'm guessing it's not that sophisticated.
Okay.
first of all, I'm a terrible speller, and unless you spell it exactly right, you don't get what you want. I
Well,
don't
Gina.
remember what the posts are. I could put 16 hats and not get anything.
Well, the spelling though you should be able to work out because if your browser should be giving you like a mark if you misspell something.
You know you're funny.
Right? So if I misspell search, I guess it doesn't. And no, see, it gives me the red underline letting me know it's misspelled. Right? So if I right-click that, then it gives me the suggestions, and of course, none of them are what I really want.
See? See?
So, okay, but here's more likely going to work. So I just flip around the C and the H at the end, right-click, and there it is. Right? So you can... The spelling thing is easily resolved, is what I'm getting at.
Hey, search for something for me. I have a question.
Something for me.
Yeah.
That's what I...
Literal, aren't you? That's funny. No, has anybody discussed how to do non-accounts payable approvals in Bill.com? Like a loan payment or a credit card bill?
Well, it would just have to go in as a bill.
Yeah, but
then
that's
approve.
improper for a credit card bill or a loan payment. I don't want loan payments and loan liabilities and credit card liabilities being moved to accounts payable.
Well, but that's the only way to do it, is you'd have to post a bill that would effectively pull it out of the loan liability and put it into accounts payable such that it could be paid that way.
Okay, so that's the only way to use the approval process is it has to be a bill.
Just like in QuickBooks, if you want to be able to get it to show up in the pay bill screen, you've got to post a bill and get it moved.
Yeah, that's improper in my world. Okay.
Right. No, I understand, but it's a practical thing balanced with proper presentation. But at the end of the day, is it really improper to say I'm just going to move it out of the one liability and into another just to get it paid?
Yeah. A loan, a credit card and a note are loans. They're not accounts payable.
I understand, but just to
if
get
you
the
move
credit
it to
card
accounts
payment
payable,
made.
it looks like the liability has been paid. Say I move it on the 1st, but I don't pay it until the 15th. It's now the loan has been reduced on the wrong date, and then when you go to reconcile your credit card statement,
the date's way off, I know, but what I'll usually do on that is, first of all, for your typical small business, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But I guess you're talking about for nonprofits where it does.
Right. And I'll change if they have to do it, if they insist, I'll change the bill to the check date.
Because most companies that I work with have a process where they need it to show up on a payables report, so they're reminded to pay it. So it's a practical thing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, for some reason, this is staying resident on my screen, and your screens aren't coming up. Oh, I know why.
Why?
Because I had clicked that present to everyone thing.
Mm.
Oop, somebody's here.
It's Uber.
Yeah.
It's Uber.
That reminds me. So when I first started the Hangout this morning, my friend Scott Scharf was asking me about who's on third, so I'm just going to reply, why ask why?
Yeah, get the Abbott and Costello routine out.
Yeah, I like doing that to people. It's fun.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Who's there? So Dennis, I think you're right. I think I'm going to have to do a video on little navigation tips and tricks in Facebook.
Yeah, because what's really obvious to you may not be obvious to the casual user, especially people that are just joining.
Mm-hmm.
We're search challenged.
Yeah.
That's a new one to me. Search challenged.
Well, I'm not thinking specifically of Facebook. I'm thinking of everywhere search.
Right. No, I know.
And I'm looking at Bill.com, and I'd love to be able to search better there.
Just search for Bill.com.
No, you're saying within Bill.com.
Right, and the documents. I don't think it's easy to retrieve them.
Well, you just got to think in terms of the right keywords. Like when I'm writing content, I'm always thinking about what keywords might somebody be searching with, such that they'd want to be able to find what I've written, right? So when you're doing the search, you got to try and think in terms of what keywords might they have used for the specific thing I'm looking for that will help me narrow it down to that. One thing you can always try is if you put your search in quotes wherever you're searching, that tells the search engine to say, give me an exact match only. If you don't put it in quotes, it'll find partials.
I have a question.
So if you want content if you want to search for if you want a result to come up only if it has the exact phrase accounts payable in Bill.com, then you put that in quotes. And because without the quotes, it'll find anything with accounts payable, anything with Bill.com. But if you put that exact phrase in quotes, it's only going to bring up a result if it finds a perfect match to that phrase.
I have a question on Google search. I'm used to, with databases, using like contains or wildcards. Can you do that in a Google search, like contains and then a quote?
I think the problem you'd run into, even if you could, is there's so much data out there on Google now that a wildcard would just get you irrelevant results. That would be my concern. But, like everything else, I would say try it.
Yeah, try it. Yeah.
That's the thing about these things is, it's not going to break your computer. Just, that's how I've learned how to do just about everything I've learned is by playing around and testing it out.
Mm.
So Scott writes, isn't that shortstop? Was the shortstop named Y? It was who's on first, what's on second, I don't know who's on third.
Right, yeah.
I don't know.
He's on third.
So now, of course, Gina, any information you want about Bill.com, you should review our course on schoolofbookkeeping.com.
Yes, Seth.
Marketing fiend.
I know. I do use Bill.com a lot, and I was particularly looking at the documents, and it may be possible that they don't call documents what I call documents.
Mm.
I assume documents that are attached to the bills or invoice would be searchable through the document reports, and it doesn't appear that they are.
No, well, Bill.com uses documents in both ways. So you can attach a document to a transaction, but you can also attach a document to a vendor. So the idea is, let's say I have an agreement with that vendor. It's not applicable to any specific bill, but I still want it there archived in case I want to retrieve it. So I can have both. But to be honest, for the document part, I really just use Bill.com for processing the accounts payable, right? And I use it for receivables, but I don't use documents really for the receivables. So what that really, because for document retrieval, that's one of those things where I'm still kind of out on the idea of going to a web-based application for that. You know, what I really want is I want something like I'm using Box.com now, you know, or ShareFile, where the access to the document is local on my computer but synced to the web. And that's one case where I don't mind a web sync as opposed to, you know, shared directly on the cloud, because I'm not worried about getting conflicts on a PDF. It's not going to happen, right? So when I'm keeping archives of bills that I've paid, it's usually always going to be a PDF. And so I'm a bigger fan of using, you know, for the bills that I paid through Bill.com, yes, of course, the document's going to be there and it's attached, and that's handy when I need to, you know, if somebody comes back to me and says, hey, you didn't pay this bill, right? Then I'm going to go to Bill.com and do that research to ensure whether or not I paid it. But I'm probably still going to have a copy of that same bill in Box.com based on my filing system, because I just find it easier to retrieve there when the context of sort of why I'm retrieving it is not based on trying to research specifically whether or not something or when something was paid. So, where'd we go? Where are my courses? There it is. Wait. And you know, it's funny, somebody brought up this question recently. What's the difference between BillQuick and Bill.com, right? And then people were asking earlier this week, I noticed, about workflow with respect to BillQuick and Bill.com, and something else was there in the mix. Billy Ann, you said, I saw you had commented yesterday you were looking for it. It's in the BillQuick users group. What was the third application people were asking about, like bringing into the mix and how that would all come together?
HubDoc, Bill.com, QuickBooks Online, BillQuick, yeah.
So here's my, I'm going to leave HubDoc out of it for a minute, because I learned something very interesting a couple of months ago. I was starting to do a series on BillQuick Online, right? This is BillQuick, and using that with QuickBooks Online. And I thought, okay, so if I'm using BillQuick, everybody knows what BillQuick is, I hope. If not, the real high level of what BillQuick is it's project management, it's time and expense tracking and billing, right? And it's very sophisticated billing software. So if I have sophisticated billing needs where I need a lot of detail on my invoices, information about the contract at large, in addition to what I'm billing the client for, the time I'm billing, the expenses I'm billing them for, all of that, when I need that kind of level of sophistication in my billing system, BillQuick is the answer. And BillQuick also has very robust project management features where you can do resource allocations very nicely, such that I can see, you know, how many hours does one particular employee, how many hours of theirs are being used. And from that I can see, are they being overburdened, or do they have room in their weekly hours such that I could actually put them on another project if I need them to. Or if I have one employee who's clearly overburdened, I can look at a really nicely laid out schedule and see, okay, well, here's somebody else who's in the same role at our company where I can shift some of the work from one to the other. So BillQuick has that kind of really robust, really powerful resource allocation, project management stuff, as well as the accounting engine. Right, so I can use BillQuick and run it as a GL package if I wanted to. So that's BillQuick, whereas Bill.com is completely different. It's just AR and AP management, right, and cash flow management, and it has the workflow management where I can employ my system of internal controls to make sure that I'm separating the duties properly between who can pay a bill, who can approve the bill to be paid, who can enter the bill, right, that kind of stuff. So I was looking at this and I said, well, now what happens, because we've talked about this in past Hangouts, where the question comes in, okay, let's say I'm using Bill.com and I'm syncing to my desktop, and I'm using my online banking and I'm downloading my bank feeds, right? So if I download my bank feeds and then I reconcile my bank account and then I go sync up with Bill.com, I'm in trouble, right? Because Bill.com is going to be trying to sync up potentially with reconciled transactions. So it's really important that you understand when you're using these applications the order in which things have to happen. So I always have to sync the app first before I download my banking, because that way Bill.com through the sync is going to be posting entries in my bank account for bills that I've paid, and those same lump sums are being pulled out of my bank account. I need Bill.com to stick that into my QuickBooks file first. That way when I update the bank feed, it finds it and matches it for me, right? So then I said, well, Well, it's true in QuickBooks Online too. I mean, QuickBooks Online is going to pull the feed, but I still want to make sure that Bill.com has synced with QuickBooks Online before I go into QBO and match up the transactions from the bank feed, right? So it's still, that same order still has to take place, because again, if I go in and confirm those, you know, then it's gonna create problems potentially in terms of the sync, especially once I've reconciled. So then I said, how does BillQuick fit into the mix if I'm trying to use Bill.com also? Because here's my concern, which is I'm going to use BillQuick to produce bills, to create AP transactions, right? I'm going to take the time that somebody's entered and turn that into a bill that I'm going to pay them, right, if it's a subcontractor. I might have an employee submitting expenses for reimbursement, which I'm going to want to turn into a bill so I can pay that bill and get them reimbursed. So those are going to be bills that I'm going to enter in BillQuick, and it's going to sync back to QuickBooks. So what I realized was, if I'm doing this all in the cloud, right, if I have BillQuick Online and I have QuickBooks Online and I'm using Bill.com, then it works because the cloud-to-cloud syncs are two-way. Right, on the AP side, if I'm using Bill.com, or no, I'm sorry, if I'm using BillQuick Online with QBO, with QuickBooks Online, then I can get a bill into QuickBooks Online, and that will sync back over to Bill.com. So when you're going cloud to cloud, the AP sync is two ways. When you're going cloud to desktop, it's only one way. Right. So if I'm using Bill.com, for example, with QuickBooks Online, AP transactions have to be initiated in Bill.com, and then they sync to QuickBooks Desktop. If I enter a bill in QuickBooks Desktop, it will not show up in Bill.com. So it's only a one-way sync for AP. AR is two ways. So with that in mind, I realized that if I'm doing everything in the cloud, if I've got BillQuick Online, I can initiate the AP transaction in BillQuick Online, let that sync to QuickBooks Online, and then that will push to Bill.com. So again, in terms of the order in which you do things, that means I've got to do BillQuick Online first, right? Then QuickBooks Online, and then let it sync up with Bill.com at that point. That's how those three can be brought into the mix together. And once you have that understanding in terms of how they work, it works beautifully, right? So I can get all of my processing of time and expenses and billing handled through BillQuick Online, knowing that that can sync through to QBO and over to Bill.com, so I can pay those bills through Bill.com. So it's a beautiful mix, but it's a little bit delicate. So you got to be careful about who's sort of turning the wheels there, so to speak, to make sure that they understand how that flow all works. So that because like anything else, when you have enough sort of power and flexibility, oftentimes it's just enough to hang yourself with.
It's like you want to have a procedures manual so people don't lose that information when they leave.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we, you know, for Nerd Enterprises, which is where I still do my consulting work, we actually have a document now, and this is what I've been working on with the bookkeepers who've been coming to me for the quote-unquote Ignite sessions, the practice, ignition, and development session that I'm doing, where I help them create a document that outlines the different apps we're using, the purpose that they're being used for, and then the rules about how they're being used. So like we have, I use Wunderlist, and we have a rule: you're not allowed to create a task in Wunderlist without making sure that you also assign it to somebody and assign a due date. Both things have to happen with every task that we create. Otherwise, they tend to get lost in the cloud of tasks.
I want to ask you a question about documents, Seth.
Mm-hmm.
Last demo that you did on HubDoc, looks like they brought in documents from the beginning of time. Is there really a need to keep all of those documents, or do you at some point want to purge those documents?
Well, if I asked our resident CPA today, Dennis, I think Dennis will say, and Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, that for audit purposes we need to go back, what, 5 or 10 years max?
General practice is 7 years for tax returns.
Okay. So
except for unless you've got basis calculations, you probably want to keep those until you sell the property. I think it's like 3 years after you sell the property. So that could be, you know, one exception. But in general, you want to keep it 7 years. Your tax, information when your tax return is 7 years.
And then over that time, I'm sorry. And then over that time, you want to get rid of them because you don't want something that the IRS can go to if it's not available, they don't.
Yeah, you don't want to keep it 8 or 9 years, because if you don't have it, that's one thing, and you're not violating. In reality, they have, as a practical matter, after 3 years, they usually don't go back more than 3 years, because it's like a closed tax. It's called a closed year, unless they suspect fraud. But as a practical, so it's just been really ultra conservative 7 years. But after that, you could kind of hang yourself, because you may provide them evidence that they wouldn't have normally had.
Or they would have looked for.
Right. Yeah. Well, you never want to volunteer.
What I was going to say is, if you know you're committing fraud, then you have to keep them forever, because there's no statute of limitations.
Well, yeah, if they suspect fraud, then everything's fair game. But
right, and the IRS has different definitions according to the IRS agent that you talk to.
Yeah, it's kind of pot luck you're getting when you have an IRS agent.
Well, that brings up something interesting that I learned a few years back, because there's a CPA here in Los Angeles that I do a lot of work with. In fact, when I do have questions that I don't know the answers to, and they have to do with tax matters, I go to him on all of this. And he's a guy who's been in practice for so long that I pretty much defer to him as gospel on anything. Like, as far as I'm concerned, if he says it, it's right. Kind of like Suchi, who's always right. So I remember him, one of our mutual clients got randomly selected for an audit, and, talking to him about that particular audit, what I realized was that, I guess because he'd been in practice for so many years, and the IRS agents are, they're regional, right? So if somebody's selected for an audit in the same geographical location, they're likely to have the same auditor who's going to be working on their stuff, to the extent that there's not so much turnover, right? So what I learned was very interesting to me, that over the years he's developed relationships with these auditors, because he's had to represent clients on audit cases like this. So that over the years, when you develop the relationship with the auditor, it's a good thing, because then they'll work with you and they're reasonable with you, as long as you're cooperative with them. And that's really, so again, even when it comes to audits, relationships are everything.
Well, like when I have my tax group, we talk about that, and how things are up for negotiation when in an audit. They'll give on some points. I mean, it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray.
Absolutely.
Right, and they did that because in this particular case, they wanted to nail him on something, but there was a major deduction that he had not taken, which they kind of held as their ace of spades, and when it came down to it, they pulled that out and said, well, that's fine, you can take that, you can take away that deduction, but here's a deduction we didn't take, it's going to end up being a wash, and ultimately the auditor agreed, so that they just said, they walked away. He got a clean audit.
Yeah, I mean, if you treat them like, just professional, treat them professionally, and they, usually they're pretty reasonable, I find.
So I want to go back to time limits and when you want to get rid of your documents. It's a liability issue. If you keep up to 7 years worth of documents as required by the IRS, you're good. But if you have 10 years worth of documents and the IRS guy comes in and says, well, since you have that, I want to see year 9 and 10, that could provide them with information that could be detrimental towards you. So why not just get rid of them?
Well, they have they have 10 years to audit. After 10 years, you're home free, because they can't audit.
I thought it was 7, but okay.
Well,
10,
they can,
but I'm talking about the liability portion of it. So if you have something like HubDoc that brings in documents from the beginning of time, do you really want that? And how easy would it be to delete files from a date back?
Well, for one thing, they'd have to, if they want to audit it, they'd have to, request as an audit. A lot of times they'll ask for returns that are not under audit, and I usually resist that. Well, for one thing, they have the information anyway on their tax. They should have the information. So. But
that's a summary. That's not the source documents.
Okay, it's.
Wait till you have the FBI show up at your door.
Well, and the reality is, if you delete the documents, the data can be recovered.
I would say
So
if
it's
you've
not
got,
like it's never really permanently deleted.
it's also helpful to have like a policy so that, you know, you're being consistent. You know, like after 7 years, we just, you know, we shred our documents or whatever.
And
So
I know
that,
CPAs that have that.
yeah.
Would you be able to do that in HubDoc?
Hmm.
I imagine you can. They have to have a delete option. I haven't
but-
gotten that deep with it.
Yeah,
You know, I
this
thought about this too because, you know, I've always had boxes of files and a regular routine. When they get to be 7, 8 years old, they go. The shredder truck is called and it's shredded, and I keep documents of what got shredded, what year, and everything. And I did have the FBI show up for a client one time, and we went to storage, and I had extra years in there, and they went, oh, took every file I had. So, but now that it's all PDFs and on hard drives, and I've got all this space, and I don't have a document management system internally, you know, technically, I guess they could come in and subpoena and get anything they want. Whereas before, I could say in an audit, those have been destroyed. Sorry. Now it's still got old copies on your hard. You know, I don't. This is an interesting.
They could walk away from with your computer,
Mm-hmm.
and there's your business.
Well, that's why I'm very careful about which tax accountants and not so much auditors, but tax accountants that I do business with. I know which ones in town really take risks, and I have seen in my 30 years of accounting that if they come in and they audit a client and they find out that the CPA has this attitude on this topic, they have the right to go in and audit that CPA's clients. So, you know, there's a man in town, I can remember sending over pristine books, and I get the tax return, and the home office exemption or deduction was exactly $5,000 higher. And I called the tax accountant, and he said, wasn't me, it was the partner, keep me out of it. You know, and I know that partner really pushes the envelope, and he'll help you in an audit at, you know, $200 something an hour. But I wouldn't have another client over there because, you know, if somebody gets audited, they can use it to spread out. So I don't know. It's the whole.
My question, and this might be a dumb question, but if I've got nothing to hide, and I know I'm doing everything on the up and up, what difference does it make if I have the older documents still?
Because
like, how could that hurt
me? Law is not definite, and everybody has a different interpretation.
Great.
What you interpreted it when you did that may be different than what the auditor is looking at 7 years later, where rules are different.
I'll tell you another thing when I hear about how bookkeepers do work is that if a client says it's this, then it's this. It's not my problem. I can't do work like that. I have to witness and see invoices, bills, and I don't just compile and produce reports.
But that's what I mean.
Name's on it. And that is a prime reason, because I have been subpoenaed many times over the years, and clients have got in trouble, and I just learned, unless I can absolutely know what that's for, and you know, I won't do that kind of work.
If I know that every bill that comes in the door gets entered and paid and it's coded correctly, and I've reviewed my financials to ensure that, I mean, I guess my attitude is always have at it. Go look at whatever you need to. You know, the only thing I'd ever be concerned about is if they thought I was guilty of any kind of fraud. But as long as I'm not, then I know that I can prove that I'm not, and I can. As long as I know that when they question any expense, that I can go back and say, here are the bills that support the expense we booked, right? If professional fees for accounting were $10,000 for the year, I can go back and pull up $10,000 in bills that were paid, and I can prove that they were paid because I have the banking records. I guess I wonder why it would really, like, my attitude has always been, if I've got nothing to hide, then I've got nothing to hide. Have at it. Go.
Well, amen, but you're talking about you yourself as a taxpayer. I'm talking about as a practitioner.
No, I'm talking about as a practitioner for my clients. I'm talking about the same thing.
So if so you're very careful that every client that you work with is obeying the normal must have a receipt for expenses and things like that.
At the very least, I know that there's a document somewhere that I can retrieve to support every dollar of expense that's on their P&L. Definitely, without a doubt.
Because you are not search challenged.
I guess not.
Well, I have a client that just got. There's a thing called an office audit, which is a lot less intrusive than a field audit, and basically they're just asking for support for documents, and it was on his charitable contributions, and so all we did was he kept good records and copies of his checks and copies of his bank statements, so I just sort of created a document, tick and tied between the source documents and the tax return, and gave it to the auditor, and all they do is they just take samples. What was interesting though is on charitable contributions, they won't take at face value what you get from say a church or a organization. They'll want to see either the underlying bank statement with the line highlighter or a copy of the canceled check. They won't take the document that you get from like your 501c at its value, which is kind of interesting.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, like I'll tell clients, look, because clients will say the classic thing is, oh, I have my credit card statement, what do I need the receipt for? And we all know as practitioners that we have to explain to the clients, because the clients legitimately don't understand initially, that the receipt actually shows what they bought. The credit card statement just shows you how much they spent there, and so the receipt is the ultimate support that you need to prove that things are coded correctly, right? Because I can go into Staples and I can buy food, right? So it's important to have the receipt. I mean, we know that, we get that, and so my feeling is, if anything, even after the 7 years, what's going to be questioned is whether or not the expense that I've claimed can be supported. So I'm thinking even then it would be better to have the documents so I can prove, yes, there was this much in office food that we bought for coffee machine supplies, and we have a folder somewhere on a share file server with PDFs of every receipt. I guess that's my thinking is always, I'd rather have the information, and it doesn't really cost me much more to keep it permanently archived digitally somewhere. And we've talked about this in the past. I have my naming conventions so that the way I name my PDF files, I can find things really quickly, because the name of the document itself practically gives me all the information that I will find once I open the receipt, right? Because it's got the name of the payee, it's got the date of the transaction and the amount of the transaction, all in the PDF file, all in the file name.
And you do that for HubDoc too?
I haven't gotten into HubDoc yet. I don't use that yet. It's on my radar.
Do the naming convention and put them in folders like that.
Well,
I'd be on the bandwagon if you could. To me, it looks like it just all goes into one accumulating file that gets bigger and bigger, and you really need to be able to do the search to be able to get the info out.
But it has a sync with Box.com, so my thinking is I would employ that sync and rename things in Box.com. That's how I would do it for sure.
Let's help Rhonda out. She's got a question about making a
Rhonda, what's your question? You got a mic?
File.
No, we can't hear her.
Huh. Rhonda, is your mic working?
No mic. All right, so it's in the chat. She says, I have backed up and created a new file, transferred IIF files, and created a new item list. Client at 14,500. Wait, but what's the original question?
She's making a new file, a new data file.
Yeah,
We've got this little side chat going on different ways to do a new file, yeah.
So, I mean, any lists, obviously, yeah, you can export all the lists to a single IIF file and import that.
I was telling her that Carl Urban has a wonderful balance forward program that reads the old data file and extracts all the open AP and AR and brings in a beginning trial balance plus all the open items.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's fantastic. She has to, she still has to rekey all the payroll. They have enhanced payroll. So my first thought is why a new data file? Is there anything you can do to salvage that old data file so that you don't lose your payroll, your custom reports, your custom item or icon bars? You know, all that is all kinds of extra work that you have to do to get the client back to where they were.
Yeah. The payroll one's challenging. I don't even think you can use Transaction Pro for that.
I think she said they had too many items on the original.
Yeah, but archiving should take care of those.
And some, you know, essentially, I don't know if it was Rhonda, but somebody was asking yesterday about renaming items in an item list. So, but either way, the easiest way to clean up the items, if they're already in QuickBooks, is to use that add, edit, multiple list entries dialog.
Yeah.
But you can't delete items that have data tied to them. You can only make them inactive. So if you're going from an old file to a new, then of course the thing to do is get it into Excel, clean it up, and then import just what you want. If you're dealing with an existing...
When you archive a file and tell it to delete out all the old names, does it ignore item names?
I'm not sure, because I've never done it that way.
Because when I have a client that gets close to the 14, I know if I say just get rid of everything through, 3 years ago, that it will delete off all the old customers, all the old vendors, and just leave me with journal entries, and it deletes out all the transactions. But I keep hearing that item names is a problem.
Yeah, items, and Rhonda's posted in the chat here too. You can merge items. That's all you can really do with them.
You can't delete them through that process?
I wouldn't imagine you could, because think about all the data that's tied to them. What would QuickBooks do with all that?
The transactions are deleted. That's what archiving does. It deletes the actual
transactions. Yeah, but it still has that aggregated sort of balance that it keeps. And that still is tied to those items, I would imagine. Has to be. Right? If you think of it from, forget about accounting for a minute, think database, right? The data has to be connected to something. With a database like QuickBooks, you're dealing with all these relational tables, and each table has the information, and then there's at least one common index between them, so that it knows how to tie a transaction to an item in an item list, and it knows how to tie that item to whatever invoices have used it.
How does it delete the names and the vendors?
It condenses it, so I don't know. I've never dug in that deep, but my guess is it has to use some kind of a name to replace the ones it deleted. I'm thinking maybe it creates some generic name.
All it does is create journal entries for the trial balance activity and deletes all transactions. So
then it effectively rips away any associations with respect to the name.
Yes. You lose all that, but you retain your history as far as just financial reporting. So in that case, you can knock down your name list to just anything used in the last 3 years.
See, at that point, and the reason I haven't done it this way much is, in my experience, usually when it comes to that point, I'm a bigger fan of just booking a trial balance and starting over. It's just
if I have a lot of users and memorize, icons and, all that, and especially payroll. Payroll is usually my biggest thing. I don't want to set up payroll from scratch, especially in the middle of the year, middle of a quarter, middle of a week.
So I never recreate a file in the middle of the year. I always do it in the beginning. When I reach that point where I see the need, then I'll plan it, and I'll say, like, if somebody called me up today and said, and we figured out, let's say within a week, that it's ready to recreate because there's such a mess in there, or it's just so much data for so many years, then I would start planning now for doing the recreate as of January 1st, basically. And so the plan would be as quickly after the year ends as possible to bring this year's books to a close, so that we could get that process done quickly, so that we don't have too many transactions to reproduce in the new set of books.
Right. Yeah, and in our busiest month.
Then you could use Excel for comparative statements between years. You just copied into Excel from the two different systems.
Yeah, and that's why when I start producing more content around migrating from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, the first thing I'm going to do is go out there and say, if at all possible, start over. Don't migrate data.
Yeah, I don't
start over.
I don't do it's just too fraught with danger. I mean, there's so many things.
That's why I sell so much of my utility. Plug. My
What was
trial
it?
balance
What-
explorer program.
What was the name of that, and what's the website to go to?
It is tools.asbinc.net. TBX. Just Google TBX.
There you go. All right, folks, it's 9 o'clock. We got to stop here. I've got a session to do.
Oh, just in time.
We'll see you all at Gina's Hangout today with 17 hats.
Absolutely. See y'all there.
Okay.
Have a nice weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.